welcome back to PA Chalk Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have Dr. Jess. How are we doing?
I'm doing well. How you doing today, Manny?
I'm good. Um, we've obviously been speaking for quite a while at this point already, so we've thought we'd just press record and just go from here.
Might
um,
as well.
but if you exactly, but if you let us know who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are. On the 6th of December, I'll be hosting a webinar on the practical application of sports science data. To grab your ticket and learn more about the webinar, follow the link in the description, and I'll see you there.
Um, Dr. J, Jessi Smith. I have a whole bunch of letters that follow my name, but on a day-to-day basis, I am a strength and conditioning coordinator. I work primarily with volleyball now, and then I assist with track and field. In the past, I've worked with a whole mess of teams. I've worked with men's volleyball. I've worked with softball. I've worked with soccer. The list goes on, and it's been an adventure. Um, and I've been here at this new position I'm in since March, and looking to see where we go with it.
Nice. Again, you are colleagues with Tracy Zimmer, who's previously been on, and
Yes.
we kind of already know some of the background of what happens at Florida. But if you give us like your principles and methods on how you sort of go through your athletes and how you program for them.
So from the technical side, um, big things for me are core strength, leg strength, and being able to kind of have that dynamic piece as far as moving with force, right? That power and acceleration. And so a lot of what I do is based around making the athletes feel good about the movements that they're doing from the aspect of being able to pair the gym. I won't say mirror, but like pairing what they do in their sport with things that make sense from like the skill, the very fundamental skill of what we're asking them to do from a muscular and a nervous system level. And so being able to make those things happen for them in our world and strength and conditioning, I think allows the athlete a freedom for how to apply what we're working with them versus it being stuck into a very finite and specific skill, but rather creating qualities that allow them to do their skills at a very high level.
As a strength coach and a business owner, my time is quite limited. My favorite part about being a coach is the fact that I get to interact with athletes and be with athletes and really coach them. That's why I use TeamBuildr. I remember the days of searching for exercises, manually typing them in, and spending hours on spreadsheets and organizing my programs. This tends to be quite tedious and a lot of time consuming, which meant that I wasn't able to coach as much. So now for my business, TeamBuildr is a non-negotiable. It's an all-in-one programming platform that lets you create and deliver workouts to your athletes just in a few clicks. With TeamBuildr, I can customize programs, track athletes' progress in real time, and generate performance reports. My athletes get full ownership of their progress and can even share feedback on how they felt the session's going. Having this in place actually gives me more time to coach and be with my athletes. If you're ready to take your next step in your programming, give more time to your athletes, head over to teambuilder.com and use promo code PAChalkup, that's PACHALQUP, and start your 30-day free trial. So you're focusing more on movement specificities that occur through their sport and how we can implement sort of the key principles of training to better help them move and access those ranges to better perform their sport.
For sure. Like an athlete that moves well is an athlete that's going to be set up for success, right? Our job is to prepare them for demands. It's not our job to coach them, unfortunately, even though, we spend that time developing this relationship with them and want to see them succeed. Sometimes helping someone succeed is knowing when to pull back as well, right? And knowing to own the space that we're in extremely well, I think makes a world of difference. We had been joking a little bit about ego, but it's like, all right, if we're doing our job really well in S&C, we're kind of unseen.
Hmm.
Like like
And
we shouldn't stick out from the aspect of like, is is she doing her job today? Like, what did she say to to the group? And it's like, damn, like they just went and had a session with coach, and they're coming back and they're like, okay, they're ready to work. Perfect. Like, if that's the only thing I hear my coaching staff say, I think we're in a good spot. They're like, oh, the athletes are ready. Perfect. You know,
Yeah.
so
It's that whole debate as well of load management, which kind of gets used to reduce a lot of things now. And for me, and like I've had this discussion where I sometimes already think that coaches know what load management is, but a lot of load management conversations now is like we're doing too much, that's too much. But actually, like load management also works the other way around. So like if you've got athletes who are subbed or are benched most of the time, at the end of the game, they're required to keep up with the demands and match whatever their teammates have done that have been playing. So like when they are called upon to play and to sort of get on and make an impact in the game, they are able to push and just go as hard as the people that they've subbed in for.
that's huge. And so whether that's being mentally ready or being physically ready are all important, right? And I feel like volleyball has a little bit of an advantage when it comes to being ready for those situations because of the nature of the sport, and us being able to utilize everyone on the team during practice is huge. But like soccer, for example, is a tough one. Basketball can be a tough one where we're kind of pairing that speed and power with a
Mhm.
high level of endurance as well at a high capacity. And so it's like, all right, if you're not going every time y'all have a game and you're playing multiple games per week, that stuff starts to stack up, right? And those opportunities start to shift and take shape. And so it's like it takes a strength coach on the backside of things being willing to work those spaces and to help their athletes be at that baseline as well as like continuing to raise the baseline. It's
Mhm.
not so much about the ceiling as it is about bringing the floor up, right? Because if that's where we're falling back to, if we're able to raise the floor up, that allows us such greater heights to get to when we're having those training peaks which are awesome, but they're not sustainable, right?
Mm.
And so being able to marry that difference and then having a coach that's willing to or open to allowing you to work in that capacity, whether they do understand or whether they don't understand, but us being able to educate in a way enough that shows the value of what we're contributing is huge.
Yeah. And like we'll take a step further, and it's like when you do have these athletes with ever demand, like I learned this early on from Coach AJ, and it was like in preseason, your sort of your goal is to build an armor around them. So like as soon as like they get into season and programs into games and all that stuff, that's just maintenance. That's just as soon as they finish a week, one chink in the armor. But that week is rebuilding that armor as in like maintenance work to keep up with the demands for the sport. Like that concept was like it was at a haha moment where it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Like we are this pre like the season is won in preseason, but like having this imagery of like you're building this whole armor so that they can go through and just like perform the best that they can is like one of the best things I've ever learned.
Because they need to be able to handle. and
Hmm.
and during season, that's the most sporadic like training opportunities that you're going to have, whether like we're taking the example of volleyball, whether you play a three setter or it's a four set or a five set, maybe you have a night where you have really long rallies in between points. All of that adds up and none of us have control over it. And so
Hmm.
it's like, okay, how are we going to adapt around these things to allow our group, our entirety to continue to move forward? And it's like, we're not trying to take any big steps at a time, but we want to keep inching our way forward through season, right? And sometimes, like you're saying, like that's being attentive to that volume and making
Hmm.
sure it matches. It's not saying it doesn't exist, but it's like, okay, it needs to match the demands as well as, we always talk about bandwidth, like it needs to match the amount of bandwidth that our athletes have to tolerate that type of stressor, right?
Hmm.
And it's a positive stress, but it's a stressor nonetheless.
Yep.
And the body
I,
responds accordingly.
yeah, exactly. And the thing is like stress is stress at the end of the day. Like whether it's emotional stress or physical stress, all the stress still gets accumulated and still all there for them. So it's like, am I going to push as hard as I can all the time? No, I'm going to make sure like there's some wiggle room, some undulation in there, so that they can recover. Like exam season's probably the most important to consider. Am I going to program like very heavy weeks in there? I'm going to ease off a little bit,
They're just toasted, you know?
hundred
And
percent.
same thing, like during season, like, trying to make homework fit around travel. And it's like, all right, just get here. Don't make it more complicated than it needs to be, keeping movement simple where they can just kind of trust the patterns that they've built and not have to be like all the way switched on from the aspect of like, all right, we're doing complex, algebraic equations in order for them to just move the bar in a linear fashion, like, no,
Hmm.
no, no. Put the bar here, move like this, do this for 5 reps. All right, perfect. We've checked that box for today, and postseason and off seasons are very different, but like in
Hmm.
season, all right, what is the most efficient, mode that we can be beneficial with?
100%. In terms of your volleyball athletes, what's your programming principles for the force production element of it?
Sometimes it's just feel good, from the end of like, all right, I'm choosing exercises that will help keep them in balance or will help reactivate, some muscles that kind of get turned off from different repetitive stresses that they experience, right? So like there's a lot of jumping in the sport of volleyball, but there are jumps of different magnitude that happen frequently, as well as, all right, how many jumps are happening during a session for our outsides, for our middles, for our setters, how many dives are our defensive specialists taking, right? Like that's a type of load, and being aware of that to know that like when they come in, they might not feel good regardless of rest time or like space between training sessions and game timing, because like you're saying and like we've mentioned before, the accumulation, like season adds up, right? And we're
Mhm.
dealing with all these stressors, and so it's like, okay, like we're going to work a program for as long as we're seeing benefit. And like you're saying, that force production, I like to use the force plates to kind of a see where my athletes like are balanced between, right and left side, but also to see kind of where their consistency is. And so if I see someone trending really poorly for a long time, that'll be something I kind of address. And sometimes it comes down to recovery habits, and then love to see improvement during season, but really the goal is to avoid a drop off. So it's like we're trying to
Mm,
maintain kind of this like wavy pattern the whole way. Like, okay, how long can I make sure that the strength that you gain during our off season and the work that you've put in, how long can I make sure that that stays during season? Is it perfect? No. Is it going to have days? Most definitely. But like, okay, how close can we be to that? And so that's kind of how I look at it. It's not so much like a you have to be able to do this specific absolute weight the entire season. It's like, no, 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 like what makes you feel like you're strong right now and what makes you feel good. And so there's different exercises that I use that kind of give some feedback for the athletes about how they're moving, as well as like, giving them that confidence, right? One of the things, I know you didn't ask this, but one of the things I love with working with women athletes is that when we're really strong in a body weight ratio, there's a lot of confidence
mm.
there. And
Fun fact, Manny.
confidence is definitely an underrated skill. And so, like, being able to incorporate those things on and off throughout season, throughout the entire training year, gives them that feedback of, like, I've gotten so much stronger. You'll catch them flexing in the mirror when they're starting to do more body weight stuff and they're able to maneuver themselves in a whole different capacity. And it's like this comes with pairing all of the work together, right? Like, A, they got to be willing to try it. B, you got to get them strong enough to build that confidence, right? And then keeping them patient in the process as they're building that strength to be able to exhibit that skill. And so, like, as long as we're strong to body weight and we're maintaining that, that's the whole aim. Because like one of the
Mhm.
beautiful things is outside of, maybe a few net interactions and some scramble play situations, there's not a lot of collision in volleyball. And so they have to be strong to themselves and be also able to endure the repetitive stress of
Mhm.
that game.
Yeah, I once read an article, and it was comparing the one. It's not a true 1 RM oval lift, but it's like measuring the strength capacity between body weight and different, like between male and females. Females, pound for pound in the upper body, are stronger than male athletes.
That's
I
impressive.
was
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I was like, fuck yeah, that's sick. um no, but like you're 100% right. It's this whole, like, it's the industry standard, so it must be like, no, like, if I'm building a push type program, I'm going to start on press ups. Like, I'm going to make sure that they can at least load themselves up first, and then put them on a bar. Like, the long term athlete development model is amazing for that. Like, you're building the strength from a very young age all the way through for longevity. So, like, why don't we implement those programs, like, even now for like our athletes that have never seen a weight room before, but then they're expected to bench 225 for fucking reps. It's not going to happen all
Just
that
because it's the
easy.
standard.
Exactly. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I've watched some impressive 225s. Like, there was an 18-year-old that did a 22 piece. I'm like, that's fucking impressive. He was a center as well, so he was a
Okay.
big boy.
Yeah, yeah. Some size to them. But then,
Yeah, but like,
all right, then the
still
question, what
18.
was the ratio like, right?
Oh no, he was like, he was strong. He is strong. Yeah, he's strong. I'm not going to name drop, but he's strong as fuck.
Hell yeah.
um, but it's that thing. Like, all these tests are circumstance dependent. Like we were talking about beforehand, is like bicep curls are amazing for buy-in. But like, if we start thinking about like other ways that we can also use them, like
Mhm.
elbow health. Elbow health is really important, especially if you've got quarterbacks, if you've got pitchers. Like, they need to be healthy in those ranges and in those movements. Curls aren't the worst for that.
And grip strength.
And grip strength, yep.
But it's like it gives them that aesthetic appeal.
100%. Um, this conversation came across. I'll give us some background. We were talking about some educational programs and having to justify your exercising and why you have chosen that exercise. That's very important for this field, because you can't just throw shit at the wall and hoping it sticks, right? We have to make
Exactly.
sure that there's a reason behind our program, and there's a reason behind why I did squat and then an RDL. Like, I like to do that because it's like a push pull. If I'm pushing, I need them to pull. Like, I need to
Mhm.
balance my athletes out. So I like to push the boundaries. I am I am what I am. I can own up to that.
There
But
we go.
I
Authenticity's first step.
I have put just normal barbell curls in a program and justified it as I need buy-in for my athletes. I need them to be excited to come in and get some payoff. Like, how many times have you seen athletes walk up to the mirror and just show a big bicep? Happens all the time. That means they're enjoying the program. So the more they enjoy it, the more that they're willing to come back and really listen to what I'm saying. That's then when I can, hey, why don't we do some belt walks? Why don't we do some weighted farmers carries? Stuff that
Mhm.
sucks. But like, hey, coach gives me big biceps, I'm gonna listen. So it's that thing of, you need to justify your exercises and make sure it makes sense for your athletes.
Hell yeah. That intention.
100%. In terms of endurance as well, what's your big considerations for? Obviously, they need to keep up that high demand over a long period of time. What's your principles behind keeping them conditioned?
During season, um, unless we've got like a return to play group, I am pretty hands off for like conditioning for athletes because a lot of like court sports, the best endurance work they can do is playing their game,
Mhm.
and and like we can do a lot of things and and get them towards that right situation, but there's so much variety within the game itself that it is hard to mimic the ever changing landscape and the differentiation between long rallies, short rallies, and how points are scored. And so um out of season, creating a variety of like opportunities has been a lot of fun. So like thinking about, okay, speed is very important, right? When we're thinking about jumping and, first steps quickness, right? So we do a lot of sprinting, a lot of directional work, some responsive work as well, and getting up and being able to sprint out of different positions, which help them cover the court in so many different ways. A lot of different jumps and bounds, and being able to do repeat efforts of all those things matter. Um,
Hmm.
and like I personally am a big fan of med balls, but also like there's so much joy in throwing a med ball, and it's a little self-soothing as well because you can be mad and throw the med ball, and
Hmm.
like for the most of the actions that you can utilize a med ball for, you're not putting yourself at risk. And so it's like there's that, therapeutic side of the work as well, or the meditative, if you
Just
will,
launching it.
where it's like once the athletes kind of figure out the program, they can kind of figure out where they can mentally rest while still maximizing their physical output, if that makes sense. And and
Yeah.
and finding that balance. And so I wouldn't be able to really give you one method of how I train the endurance, but it's like using a mixture, A, prevents staleness and overuse when they're out of season, and B, it gives them a chance to do something different than what they're able to do normally, which can help refresh them in total, right? And so
Hmm.
sometimes if our training doesn't look exactly like the sport, sometimes that can be the
Hmm.
best thing for the athlete. And that's not saying
Yeah.
like, oh, go and play a completely different sport. It's like, no, no, no. Like, let's break it down into the qualities that we need, but present it in a way that is refreshing.
Yeah, Coach Cam Dietz has came on, and he's predominantly rotational sports like baseball, golf, but he actually introduces med ball, volleyball into his program because he loves introducing games
Mm-hmm.
into his workouts. So like, and it's exactly what you're saying. The amount of joy you can see people have just launching a medicine ball as far as they can. Again, it's the intent is there because they're wanting to see how far they can launch it, and you're still chasing some adaptations. It's phenomenal. um you kind of mentioned responsive work. What do you mean by that, and how is it that you implement it?
So changing what our cue is for like the start of the activity, or having different different cues or different kind of like triggers during like the drill itself. And so um I call it twitch work. But
Mm.
really it's like being able to like allow the nervous system to have a high rate of coding, right? And so I call it twitch work. And so it's like the little footwork, like hip flip drills. So I've stolen a lot from like American football as well as like soccer. And being able to bring some of the like how do I put it? I'm in love with footwork. If it really comes down to
Yeah.
it, like that's what I love. Like strength coach is awesome, but like I love being able to help people move faster and just get from point A to point B. And that first step quickness can absolutely annihilate someone. And so like
Mm.
it's such a small thing that brings me so much joy. And so being able to create training sessions that, help the athletes feel like A, they're doing that better, but B, at the heart of that is a high level of neural control, right? And so if we're better tuned into our nervous system, the hand-eye coordination piece, the other parts all come together, and the like, you're able to turn, because I talk about the nervous system as either being like a giant transistor with in the electrical system, or you think about it as like a fire hose, right? And the more you're able to tap into that nervous system, the more we're able to turn up the rate of water coming out, right? It goes from like a trickle to it being like an absolute fire hose of just this jet stream, right? And being able to tap into that as best as possible, I think brings so much transfer for athletes without them realizing what they're doing. And so we'll do like hip flip drills, we do ladder work, and being able to incorporate ladder work from the essence of having to have control while still moving fast, right? We
Mm,
always joke, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? And being able to be patient with it to build up to that, right? Or creating like a crescendo of movement. And I use a lot of music analogies, and sometimes athletes just look at me like, what are you talking about again? And so it's like being able to explain on the fly this so many different ways has been important, but also like, all right, if it gives them something to connect to, and there's this, understanding of like theory with this interchange of idea, it also creates a different perspective on what we're doing, right? And the more
mhm,
we're able to create connections between these different patterns, there's a certain kind of efficiency that can come about in our life, right? And that's not saying everything is the same color, but it's like, all right, if everything has a color, how do we make this beautiful picture, right? And so it's like,
mm,
all right, this is this color, this is that color. Do they go together? Sometimes, right? Like fashion is the coordination of outfits, right? And who can tell you that your outfit doesn't go together? But if you're confident about it, you know what I mean? Like, okay, but then knowing how do we apply these things for it to make sense from the training capacity, and taking that twitch work and then employing it into different situations, right? So not just only being able to respond to a stimuli fast, but can I make a proper response that leads into a skill,
mhm. I really
right?
like the analogy as well. Like this whole crescendo. Like I've got music backgrounds, like, and I've never thought about pitting it, but it's like it's this build up, and you can take it in a couple of different ways as well. But it's like this build up of performance, that build up where that just gets you here and ready to go. But you can also look at crescendo in a sort of programming sense. Like I need to start slow, build up. We need to go from like like a whole movement approach, but then go into the really finite. So it's that build off up of like that. Yeah, I love that. That's sick.
Well, then, like, even thinking about like how you coach these different things, right? When you're learning something, how are you? You're calm, you're explanative, and you're giving as much detail as possible. And then when you're trying to load and work at a higher volume, we typically have less instruction and a lot more go, go, get, like get out of here. And
Fired up.
and so our coaching changes to match the adaptations that we're changing or that we're chasing, right? And we have to be adaptable in how we're looking at this, right? Like if we're having a sprint session, like no way in hell am I standing over there like ready work, like no, 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 like I've got to be at a high clip too to get you guys to get at a high clip, in matching the intensity that is needed for what our emphasis is for
Mm.
the day.
I've previously spoke about this, but I did the 1 year episode of this podcast was with Brandon Chu, who I interned with, and we were speaking, and then amongst everything, we spoke about like having a dimmer. So as our athletes roll in, as our clients rolled in, we need to sort of like either dim ourselves or like match the energy that's coming in, right? But then we also have that power to build it up or bring it down. Like if someone's coming in far too hot, we need to be like, hey, let's chill a little bit. We've got time
Yeah,
for
let's
that. So
stretch.
like,
Let's stretch. Let's
yeah.
let's go through our warm up. Yeah.
But like it's that dimming system that you can sort of see where your athletes at, match them, and then either bring them up or take them down. That's super important for, again, understanding where your athletes are and just pushing everything to go as smoothly as possible.
It's all part of it, right? Because um earlier when we were talking, you said, if you're thinking that someone stole your program, it's like, well, are they going to coach it how you coach it? Like you and I could have the
Mhm,
same program, and even like the perspective that you spoke about of like us looking for different adaptations out of the same exercise even, right? And so not only will we approach that coaching piece so differently, what we're seeking from the same training bits, is so different.
mhm. That's why this industry is so interesting. Is like there's a million and one ways to skin the cat, but like what's your way? Like let me learn from it, see if it's useful to me or not. If it's not, I still come away with something interesting. For if a scenario comes up that's needed, I already have in the back of my head.
Hmm.
Like I always talk about this expression. So I'm Portuguese, but we have this expression of you can learn something from everyone, even a dumb person. You can learn not to be them, and it's
Yeah,
like these situations you can always learn from everything that comes across.
I definitely agree with that. And even like some of the athletes that you have over the years, sometimes they teach you how to handle an athlete that's similar to them, once you've established a relationship with them, or how do I establish a relationship with an athlete that might seem tough, from the end of like tough to connect with, or tough to figure out what they like, or tough to get motivated. But at the heart of it, we're all still people, and
Yeah,
how do we make that work? And so, like you're saying, like every situation's a learning situation. The type of athlete that your coaches recruit might be totally different than the same sport you had somewhere else, but this club runs this way, and finding out like, okay, how do I fine tune what I'm doing for the group that I'm working with in this moment right now? Not what have I been
100%.
successful with, what does the group that I work with right now, what do they need?
Hmm. And it's that self awareness of it. Like there's been athletes that I only managed to connect with on the last day of me being there, and it was over something so minute that I was like, I could have done this on day one, and we would have it would have been class. Like I always talk about this particular athlete, but he's like a very analytic guy. Like everything is programmed, everything is laid out, like everything has to be perfect. But like movement and lifting isn't always perfect. He
No,
expects it to be. So like for him, it was like he has to have the right breath before he lifts. And like it became a joke that he could only lift if I was there watching. If not, he would fail his lifts. But it was that thing of like he just had to make sure that everything was right. And I was like, look, just remember these cues. And we were talking about like a clean, just a clean from floor, and
hmm
we're like explode, catch, and explode again. So it's that explode up, catch at the bottom, and then explode up again. And like the delivery of the words that I was using helped him figure out when he had to do things. And there's like that control again. And I was like, okay, now you have to do it without me. Fails. And I'm like, fuck.
that part. But like, even like taking the time, or the athlete being open for you to explain and have a coaching moment is huge. Like sometimes that takes months
Hmm.
to have that moment.
Yeah. Like for me, that's one thing that I try and establish as soon as I get there. Is like it starts with questions of the day. What's your favorite ice cream one day? What's your favorite movie the second day? What's your favorite series third day? You're stranded on an island. Like it just gets and this again that crescendo. I love that analogy. Whereas like the questions become more in depth. So then now I get to learn about you. Like tell me about you in a way that's not it's not me asking like tell me your most traumatic experience. No, like we're going to talk
That's
about
your
their
opening.
lives and yeah, that would go so smoothly.
They'd be like, what is this guy talking about? Who let him in?
Do we know him?
Right, right. Does anyone here know him?
But it's like building this rapport with them that at some point they'll be like, "Hey, coach, I'm struggling today." I'm like, "Okay, like what's happening? Like, are you okay? Like, yeah, I just had an argument with my family. Okay, cool. Today we're going a bit more relaxed. Let's just
hmm
take it easier. Let's just get back." And then again, that load management. I'm not going to load someone when I'm not going to be the extra asshole in that day. Like I'm going to be that friend that day. And it's like establishing that relationship early on is key to a successful program.
Hell yeah, and that's part of load management. Like we were saying, like all of these things are stressors. We don't get to differentiate for our nervous system, for our body, whether or not it's a positive stress or not, because too much is too much, right? And
Mhm.
we're always towing the line of enough to force adaptation, but not enough to destroy the system.
Yeah. It's a very fine balance.
And it's ever changing.
Yeah. Like that's why I've apart from the America experience that I had, Like I had never experienced something to that level of like if you fuck up, you're gone just as quick. And it's like when I got the return to play guys, I was like, first of all, I never was told that this was going to happen today. I would have made a plan, but like I was in charge of the return to play, and I was like, if I fuck up and make them worse than they already are, like I'm so gone. Like I'm gone, and I'm an intern at this point. I'm just like, fuck. Like, what do I like? How do I do this?
Yeah.
It's like, and again, it just obviously being smart and logical. I think a lot of people miss is like if something seems a bit too much and too extra, it probably is. So
Right,
let's
like
tone
keep
it
it
down.
simple.
Simple, like the fundamentals are the fundamentals for a reason. Like they work. So just stick to them and just adapt where you can. Like for me, I love bear crawls. Like bear crawls, you're quickly going to learn how sucky things can get.
But how
So
strong and
like
how balanced you'll be because of it. Yes.
exactly.
And you can hate it
Exactly.
during, but if you love the benefit, I got you. We're good.
hmm I had to. I think they were all line, and they were like, "You really like your bear crawls." I was like, "I really fucking do," and you're going to keep doing them.
I feel like there's one exercise that every coach has that like that or like a certain methodology that the athletes, like sometimes they'll ask me about reps and everything like that. And I'm like, well, it says this today, and I'll usually write things down on a board so that like if there's a question, we can all turn to it and it doesn't change during session. And one of the athletes responded to me this week and she goes, but it is you. Like, this is being written by you. So, like, I don't know if I can trust it. And I go, that's fair. And I was like, today we're just going to keep it as this. Like,
Yeah.
because you always got to
I
have
was.
just a little bit of an edge. Like, you can't be all the
Mhm.
way figured out? And so I'm like, all right, we still got the edge. Perfect. Perfect. You trust me enough to be like, okay, let's do this. You know enough to ask the question if you don't understand, and you're ready for the response either way.
Mm, yeah, you need athletes that will ride for you. Yeah.
Hell
In
yeah.
terms of your, we spoke a lot about volleyball. In terms of your other like sports, are you sticking to the same principles and methodologies, or are you changing depending on what is being presented?
So loosely, it's all the same framework because it's how I interpret, how I, connect these dots, so to speak, right? Um, but from that integration piece of like how we were talking about coaching differently for different situations, each sport kind of has its own personality, and then each
Mm,
team has their own personality within that sport frame mindset. And so being able to adapt for how that sport is usually coached, as well as like, how do they look at different parts of training and being able to overcome that. Like with my soccer teams that I've worked with, strength and conditioning is either not at all, or it's like, oh, we just like we couldn't do it during season. It's like, no, 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 like that's probably the time where you might need it the most. And being able to overcome preconceived notions, and they exist in every sports setting depending on what someone's previous experience had been. So thinking about all of the sports that I've worked with, every program that I've given has been different, but it comes from the same like methodology or
mm,
planning mindset, right? Because for like if we take any para sport out of it, at the heart of it, we're dealing with a lot of the same things. We've got two
mm,
arms, we've got two legs, and we've got to move from point A to point B in some fashion, right? Either we're using a tool to make that happen, or we're using our body and we might be on grass, we might be on, a field, we might be on a court. And like, okay, how do we satisfy the goals that you need to have? What kind of qualities do you need to have? And what are we at risk at by you continuing to practice your sport more and more and more, right? Like what are our overuse tendencies? So what are we trying to counteract, if that makes sense? and
yeah.
and what is like something that might take away from your sport quality, right? Like us running really long distances will take away that bounciness factor that we're looking for in a lot of our power athletes, right? And being like, okay, well, how can we maybe satisfy that if someone's looking for some of that training, but not necessarily going all the way, right? And being able to kind of marry the gaps, but still hit the appropriate extremes for what their demands could be. Because, like you were saying,
Yeah,
like we're building this armor, right? And not every piece of the armor is going to be used in every single situation. But also, the armor can't be so heavy that, our athletes can't carry it with them when they go. It has to be an
mhm,
appropriate amount, an appropriate level. And so I would say there's that modification, but in the same breath, like we need good qualities regardless.
yeah, 100%. In terms of, you previously mentioned that you do look at like a lot of the force play data and see where their asymmetries are. Do you determine any other factor with it? So, like for me, for example, I look at readiness for the session, and again, I can't always go off it because sometimes my athletes are exhausted, but it's the day that they hit the PBs the best. So, like sometimes it's just you have to push when you push. But
Hmm.
like if I have a sprinter who jumps 75 to 76 centimeters, which is a fair bit, one day he came in and jumped 65. That's a big discrepancy. So I kept an eye on it. So do you just look at asymmetries, or is there other factors that you look into?
Asymmetries are a small part. So like thinking about how our sports are played and how that all goes together. Do I think that I'm going to get everyone to a 0 point? By no means.
Mm,
But it like the asymmetry is more so a checkpoint. Like if we're seeing anything weird happening, so to speak, like okay, at minimum we should be able to keep you at your set point, but if we can make positive change, perfect. And that's just a piece of what I look at. A big fan of RSI
mm,
because I feel like that's a really good readiness indicator. Am I able to change like how we're moving within our program right now with that? Not so much. So I'm looking at it more longitudinal and trending versus it being in session right now. Because I've opened it up to my athletes to be able to jump when they feel ready versus starting the session with the jumping, and
okay.
especially a sport that does jump. I want to give them that benefit of being like, hey, if you need to warm
Mm,
up a little bit longer, and they're a lot of them are very long limbed, and so like it takes a little bit longer to get warmer, the taller and more length you have, and so giving them that freedom has helped, I think, as far as like getting more consistent data. So it's like, all right, they'll come over when they're ready or when they finish session, and so if they are tired, and I'm starting to see a trend of everyone being tired, and it's like, okay, their ability to load is slowing down, right? That eccentric speed, right, for their acceleration. I'm looking at, all right, how well are they handling the eccentric force on that plate? Because being able to catch yourself is part of, preventing injury, right? And as well as, like you said, like the height that they jump. I'm just looking for consistency on that. And
mm,
even so, it's like, okay, if they didn't jump as high and I'm looking at these other factors and they were slower to load and they were able to put down less force, it was like, okay, today might have just been a day, right? And when we get to know ourselves and we start to have longer term like models, we should
mm,
hopefully see trends upward, but the trend looks like a wave the whole way. And so you're going to have these, my goal is to reduce the valleys as much as possible,
mhm,
and if we peak, make sure that the peak is happening at the correct time and hoping that we can stay within range of that. And so it's like the goal is to go up. And so I have these fancy sheets that I make for them that have all their data on them. It's got a like a radar web chart on it and everything like that, so they can
okay.
see how they compare to the team. And then they also have access to normative values. But at the end of the day, I've told them over and over again, y'all are competing with yourselves. And in no part do I assume that you guys are going to PR every time you jump on this. During season, don't hold your breath to PR. Do we want to improve? Most definitely. That is always on high on our list. But my goal is to keep you in the same range as best as possible. So if we're steady, that would be like an A plus in my book. If we have some ups, cool. if we have some downs, okay, how can we minimize that, right? And so kind of talking them through it to be like, this isn't really a metric that you win, but if
Mm-hmm.
we can improve, that's fantastic. And if we can avoid any like decrements in their ability to express any of these qualities, then that's a win as well. And knowing that like the technology does not determine all of it, but it gives us a tool to track it, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and looking at all of these things as tools, right? Because at the heart of it, we as coaches have to be like tuned up and aware of the situations that our athletes are in, because even if the device does tell me that an athlete feels XYZ, and you know what, they tell me that they feel fantastic, but they're playing tomorrow, I'm trusting the athlete. I'm like, yeah, you feel fantastic, you know, and getting them ready for what they need to be ready for, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's the mental capacity piece or it's the physical capacity, right? And our sports are in a way right now where we don't have long off seasons. And so being able to find that medium in a way that helps them is the best thing that we can do.
100%. How important is the psychology piece behind the way you deliver their training?
It's huge. Um, I would be lying if I say I always have the bandwidth to handle that appropriately. But I think being level as possible helps to make that happen. And so one of my things is consistency. And like your mood will go up and down and everything like that, but consistency from the aspect of like, if I tell you something is this way, we're going to find our best possible route to make sure that it stays that way. If we have to modify, we modify, but I want my athletes to always feel like when they come into session and I introduce something, it will be as we said it was going to be, as best as possible, you know, versus like, you know, they're coming in and they're a little wary or like anxious of session because they might not know what mood you're coming in at, you
Mm.
know, they might not know what their training is going to be like. And it's like, do they need to know all the time? No. Do they want to know? Sometimes. But in the same breath, like, okay, if I tell you something, my aim is to be as committed to my word as possible. And I joke, but like in the most serious way, none of us have shit but our word, right? And so being able to be consistent on that has been a really big tool for me from the like the psychological side, and also making sure that we're encouraging them. You know,
Mm.
it for probably more athletes than not, S&C is not their favorite thing innately, and showing them where they can get their mini wins in this space or feel supported, I think is crucial. One of the most awesome parts of, you know, our jobs is we don't determine anyone's playing time, but we can help them earn playing time from the aspect of making sure they're ready, having conversations that prepare them for the hardship mentally of sport, right? A lot of them are well adapted for the physical piece. The mental piece continues
Mm-hmm.
to change, it evolves, it is difficult, you know, and life keeps happening as we're trying to do these things and be super focused on these goals that we have. And so, kind of, you know, being able to marry the mental tough, like, not even toughness, it's like a mental resilience for the demands at the current moment, and being able to handle that, I think, is
Yeah.
so crucial. So it's like, I feel the word coach should be enough of a qualifier for that mental piece as well, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're never free of mental health from the aspect of it affects everything we do, right?
Yeah, I had this athlete, and they switched to a new team, and the way that the new team worked was very cut. Like if you don't do this, cut. If you don't do that, and like you're not an important player, like you're quickly cut. So like for me, it was like helping her through the. It's okay if you fail, but let's make sure that you're not taking all that on yourself. Like you're part of a team. The mistake wasn't solely yours, and it was like that thing where they thought that they made a mistake and it cost them the game, but then it's kind of putting that in perspective. Like, okay, but if we'll say, like, for example, the goalie was there, they did their job, that wouldn't have happened. If
Hmm.
the attack didn't, the attack didn't properly block the defenders from coming forward, they then got past their midfielders, they shot, they scored. Like there's a whole piece. It wasn't just on you to defend that, to protect the goal. Like there, it's a whole team effort if you are losing. So
Facts.
for like yeah, so it's kind of like a lot of what we do is also put things into perspective. Like it's not always about you did this, you fucked up, now you're gone. No, it's like okay, you made a mistake. What did you learn from it? Is there was it solely your fault? Probably not. Let's identify some things that could have been probably handled better so that wouldn't have had such an impact. It's kind of like again, perspective is everything for them.
And that's huge. So then, like, all right, going back to that picture of load management, if we're able to adapt our perspective, some of these things won't take as much from the bandwidth as before, right? Or we're able to set them aside temporarily to be able to handle what needs to be handled in the current moment. Because it's like things don't go away if they're not handled, right?
Mhm.
And I think the tough piece is like, I don't know if you got told this, growing up, but it was like, when you walk in here, leave it at the door. And it's like, no, no, no. It's like, okay, you don't necessarily get to leave it at the door. You might bring it in a little bit with you, but how we handle this next, hour and a half, this next 2 hours is very important for you to be able to return back to that. And it's like, it's okay if it comes through the door a little bit with you, but knowing how to handle it in stride is crucial.
Mhm. Like I previously spoke about the experience from a general population side, and that's where I learned like you can leave it at the door, but you can also talk about it. Like sometimes you can just make jokes about the shitty things that's happened to you during that day. It gives you that human side that people will want to connect with. Like there's nothing worse than having a coach that's perfect all the time. Like that's
Or you never know
that's
anything about
fishy.
their life. You're like, do you just go to your office and power down? Like, where's the plug?
Where's the off button?
Right. Like, and so it's like you do like having personality is a way to build rapport and trust though. And like I think sometimes we get so caught up in that term professionalism that
Mhm.
we don't understand that we can be professionally ourselves.
Yeah,
Like
I agree.
we have levels, or I hope that we have levels no different than, we're asking of our athletes, right? And meeting them in the middle where a lot of a lot of the athletes that I work with personally are between 18 to 22. They're in such a unique position in their life that, they do need to be helped sometimes, and sometimes they need to be held accountable, and finding that balance to help them mature in the right ways is crucial. But you gotta
100%.
be humanable.
Mhm. I previously mentioned the question of the day. And like my favorite question is the ice cream flavor. I feel like you can tell a lot about a person depending on what their ice cream flavor. If people say vanilla, I'm always like, "You're dodgy. I'm going to keep an eye on you." I'm joking. I'm joking.
See, but now I'm
Um,
curious, what's your answer to the question of the day? What's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
okay, so there's a couple. So if we're going store bought,
Okay.
and
Wait,
I
wait,
love
wait.
my
Okay, here's the qualifier.
okay
Like OG, like comfort, like this is the flavor and you can get it anywhere
honeycomb,
kind of deal.
honeycomb.
Honeycomb ice cream.
Yeah,
They don't make that over here.
I think they. I've have I had. I've had no. I've had
Honeycomb?
honey and yeah. So it's like you get like actual bits of like the honeycomb inside. It's tough, but like you get the inside.
I've never had honeycomb ice cream.
You need to try it.
I love honey, which makes me even sadder. So a matter of
Oh, like
time.
if there's an Aldi or Lidl close by, they will most likely have it.
I'm gonna
Those are
look
the
next time. I go to
like
Aldi all the time.
nice. I fucking love Aldi. Like that's the only place that you can get Scottish meat in, and we have a lot of restrictions on what goes into our food. So like the Scottish meat is the best meat. So like I always go for them.
Okay. Hell
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, honeycomb. If we're going like store bought, I do like Ben and Jerry's, like the salted caramel.
Okay.
Also, fun fact: I didn't know that Ben and Jerry's actually had shops. I thought it was just like like a supermarket type deal until I got to America and saw actual Ben and Jerry stores, and I was like, "Huh,
They
that's
do
sick."
exist.
um, so that's store. But if I'm going, I went to Molly Moon's in Seattle. They did honey lavender. That was phenomenal, like amazing.
Did it have any of the flour in it?
No, 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 no.
But
It was just
still,
like
like
it was a
even
slight hint of lavender, but it was like honey. It was amazing.
that sounds fantastic.
Yeah. What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Well, I'm a sucker for a little bit of food coloring, but like OG can get it anywhere kind of flavor would be cookies and cream.
Cookies and cream fair. It's too sickly for me. Like I've got very sensitive to sweet, but I do like cookies and cream. Ben and Jerry did a nice cookies and cream. They also did one that they fucking discontinued, and I'm still pissy about it. And it's like ice cream, like you know the biscuit ice cream cone.
No,
So it was like just an ice cream cone, like the biscuit side, but they put it inside Ben and Jerry's with like chocolate and stuff. Amazing flavor. Discontinued. I'm
of
pissed.
course. And it sounds like it was just simple and straightforward, but like amazing.
Yeah.
That's a letdown.
Saying this, I'm always very honest with my athletes and saying that I will demolish an ice cream tub in one sitting. And they're like, they kind of look at me like, am I allowed to admit to this too? And I'm like, fuck yeah, I do it.
Well, because my favorite thing is like they always like, you probably just eat like prep meals and whatever, whatever. And I was like, I'm so real. Like, but also part of it too is like having a balance. Like all of this
Mhm,
is about balance. You know what I mean? And like, I love pizza. I eat bread like every day. Like, in
mhm,
but in the same breath, like, all right, like we have the fortunate experience to have very well a very well supported dietitian staff, and they're on
mhm,
our athletes and everything like that. But in the same breath, like, all right, having this balance, and they're good about teaching them balance from the aspect of like you kind of have to have it, because otherwise
mhm,
this training will take a toll on your body, right? And that feeds into your
100%.
mental state as well. Like if you can't mentally recover because you're underfueled and your body's literally running overtime when you should be sleeping, even though you're asleep, you're not getting this level of sleep that you could. And so it's like you're doing all these
100%.
habits in vain.
Yeah. Like if I know an athlete has like very poor relationship with not poor relationship, that's a bad wording for it, but like is unaware of the impacts of nutrition, recovery, sleep, like they're just they just don't know. I will straight up tell them like after a game you probably haven't ate what you should the day before or the day of. After your game, go smash a whole pizza. Just go for
Reset.
it. Yeah, and just like you'll probably feel shit the day after. That's okay. It's a recovery day. But you will actually have ate enough and it's been again you get your carbs, you get your proteins, you get everything that is needed for you to at least have something to work through and recover from it.
Otherwise you're running on fumes, and that's dangerous.
I really do appreciate you for coming on and sort of knowledge sharing with me. If you want to let everyone know where they can find you and sort of reach out to you.
Most definitely. Thank you, Manny, for having me. I really appreciate it. So I'm on Instagram as Dr. underscore Jessica, Jessika Smith. I have a little unique spelling. I can thank my father for that. Otherwise, you can find me at justrawskill.com, or my other Instagram, which is at justrawskill underscore, which is an acronym based off my initials. So that's a hybrid of like personal training as well as consultation for sport and performance psychology.
Perfect. Um, really do appreciate you for coming on and we'll speak later.
Sounds good. Thank you again, Manny.
Peace.